Marcus Williams walked through the glass doors of First National Bank's Charlotte branch at exactly 10:23 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. The bank was moderately busy with customers waiting in the teller line and several people meeting with loan officers in the glass-walled offices along the side wall. Marcus wore a navy blazer over a light blue dress shirt with khaki pants and casual dress shoes. He carried a simple manila folder containing documents he'd prepared specifically for this visit. Before starting the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Now let's get back to the video. Marcus was nervous, but not for the reasons anyone in the bank would have guessed. 3 weeks ago, he had been promoted to regional director for First National Bank's Southeast Division, overseeing 47 branches across North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. At 34 years old, he was the youngest person ever appointed to the position and the first black man to hold it in the bank's 127-year history. Corporate headquarters in New York had sent him to conduct surprise evaluations of several branches in his new territory. They'd received complaints about discriminatory lending practices at multiple locations, and they needed someone to go in undercover and see what was really happening. Marcus had volunteered immediately because he'd experienced banking discrimination himself earlier in his career, and he knew how damaging it could be. The Charlotte branch was his third evaluation this week. The first two branches had performed reasonably well with minor issues that could be addressed through additional training. Marcus hoped this one would go just as smoothly, but he had his doubts. The complaint file for this location was thicker than the others, and several former employees had reported a toxic culture under branch manager Patricia Reynolds. Marcus approached the customer service desk where a young woman with a name tag reading Jennifer greeted him with a professional smile. "Good morning. How can I help you today?" "I'd like to speak with someone about a small business loan." Marcus kept his voice friendly and his tone casual. "Absolutely, let me see who's available." Jennifer checked her computer. "It looks like Mrs. Reynolds, our branch manager, has an opening right now. She can meet with you." "That would be great, thank you." Jennifer picked up her phone and made a quick call, then hung up and smiled at Marcus. "She'll be right out. You can have a seat over there and she'll come get you." Marcus thanked her and walked to the waiting area. He sat down and pulled out his phone, pretending to check messages while actually activating the recording app he'd installed for these evaluations. Everything that happened from this point forward would be documented. A few minutes later, a woman in her late 40s emerged from one of the offices. She wore an expensive-looking gray suit with a cream-colored blouse, and her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun. Her face was heavily made up, and her expression was professionally neutral, bordering on cold. She scanned the waiting area, and her eyes landed on Marcus. Something flickered across her face just for a second, before the professional mask returned. "Mr. Williams?" Patricia Reynolds extended her hand but didn't smile. "I'm the branch manager. Come with me, please." Marcus shook her hand and followed her to her office. The space was decorated with corporate motivational posters and photos of Patricia receiving various bank awards. She gestured to a chair across from her desk, and Marcus sat down. Patricia settled into her chair and folded her hands on the desk in front of her. "So I understand you're interested in a small business loan. What kind of business are you looking to start?" "Actually, I'm looking to expand an existing business." Marcus opened his folder and pulled out the fake business plan he'd created. "I run a small consulting firm that helps local businesses with their marketing and digital presence. I've been operating for 3 years, and I want to open a second location and hire additional staff." Patricia took the business plan but barely glanced at it. "What's your current annual revenue?" "Last year we did about $270,000 in gross revenue." Patricia's eyebrows raised slightly. "And what are you looking to borrow?" "I was hoping to get approval for a $75,000 loan to cover the new location equipment and initial payroll." Patricia set down the business plan and leaned back in her chair. "Mr. Williams, let me be honest with you. Based on what you've told me, this loan is probably not going to be approved." Marcus kept his expression neutral. "Can I ask why?" "Several reasons." Patricia ticked them off on her fingers. Your revenue is relatively low for the amount you're asking to borrow. You haven't provided any information about your credit history, which suggests it might not be strong. And frankly, consulting firms are high-risk businesses with unpredictable income streams. Banks prefer to lend to businesses with more stable revenue models. I have excellent credit, actually. Marcus pulled out another document from his folder. My credit score is 781, and I've never missed a payment on anything. I also have documentation of consistent revenue growth over the past 3 years, showing a 23% increase year over year. Patricia took the document and glanced at it quickly. That's good, but it doesn't change the fundamental risk profile of your business model. What about collateral? I own my home outright. It's worth about $300,000. I'm willing to use it as collateral for the loan. Patricia's expression didn't change. Mr. Williams, I'm trying to save you time here. Even with good credit and collateral, this loan is not likely to be approved. Our lending standards have become much stricter recently, and businesses like yours just don't meet our criteria anymore. Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice calm. Can you explain what you mean by businesses like mine? Small businesses without significant assets or proven long-term stability. Patricia's tone was sharp and dismissive. Look, I've been in banking for 23 years, and I can tell you that consulting firms like yours are usually started by people who get laid off and can't find traditional employment. They struggle for a few years, then fold. The bank loses money and the borrower ends up in financial distress. We're trying to avoid that outcome. So you're denying my loan application without even reviewing it fully? Marcus watched her carefully. I'm providing you with realistic expectations before you waste more of your time and mine. Patricia pushed the documents back across the desk. If you want to formally apply, you can, but I'm telling you right now that my recommendation will be for denial. The bank has other applicants with stronger profiles, and we need to allocate our resources accordingly. By stronger profiles, you mean what exactly? Established businesses with significant assets, proven track records, and stable revenue. Not 3-year-old consulting firms asking for loans they probably can't repay. Marcus leaned forward slightly. Mrs. Reynolds, have you looked at my financial statements? Have you reviewed my business plan in any detail? Have you checked my credit report or verified any of the information I've provided? Patricia's face reddened. I don't need to review every detail to know that this doesn't meet our lending standards. I've seen hundreds of applications like yours, and they all follow the same pattern. I'm being honest with you, Mr. Williams, which is more than most loan officers would do. You're being honest that you've made a judgment about my creditworthiness and business viability based on assumptions rather than actual data. I'm being honest that your application is weak and unlikely to be approved. Patricia's voice was rising now, and people outside the office were starting to glance their way. Now, if there's nothing else I can help you with, I have other appointments. Actually, there is something else. Marcus pulled out his phone and stopped the recording app. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and removed his First National Bank corporate identification card. He placed it on the desk between them. Patricia looked at the ID and her face went completely white. The card clearly showed Marcus's photo along with his name and title, Marcus Williams, Regional Director, Southeast Division. I'm not here to apply for a loan, Mrs. Reynolds. I'm here to evaluate this branch's customer service and lending practices. I've been sitting in your office for 15 minutes, and in that time, you've failed to review my application materials, made assumptions about my creditworthiness without checking actual data, dismissed a qualified loan request without proper evaluation, and made several comments that suggest bias in your lending decisions. Patricia's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Marcus continued, his voice calm but firm. I've recorded this entire conversation as part of my evaluation. I'm going to ask you some direct questions now, and I need honest answers. First question, do you handle all loan applications this way, or just ones from applicants who look like me? I don't know what you're implying, Patricia stammered. I'm not implying anything. I'm asking directly. Do you deny loans to black applicants more frequently than white applicants? Of course not. Patricia's voice was defensive. I treat all customers the same. The data suggests otherwise. Marcus pulled another folder from his bag, this one containing actual bank records. Over the past 2 years, this branch has denied 73% of loan applications from black small business owners, compared to 41% for white small business owners. That's a 32 percentage point gap, Mrs. Reynolds. How do you explain that? I don't have those numbers in front of me. Patricia was visibly sweating now. I'd need to review the data. I have the data right here. Marcus opened the folder showing detailed spreadsheets. I also have complaints from 8 different customers alleging discriminatory treatment at this branch. 5 of those complaints specifically name you as the loan officer or manager who denied their applications. All 5 of those applicants were black or Hispanic. All 5 had credit scores above 720. All 5 had viable business plans and sufficient collateral, and all 5 were denied without proper review. Patricia said nothing. Her face had gone from white to red. I also have testimony from 3 former employees of this branch who report that you routinely made racist comments about customers and instructed loan officers to be extra scrutinous with minority applicants. One former employee has a recording of you saying that black business owners are high risk because they don't understand money management. Do you remember saying that, Mrs. Reynolds? I never said that. Patricia was shaking now. Whoever told you that is lying. So you're telling me that 3 separate former employees all independently made up the same story, and that the data showing massive disparities in your approval rates is just coincidence? Patricia stood up abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. I'm calling our regional office. I am the regional office. Marcus remained seated and his voice was steady. I report directly to the CEO. And right now I'm conducting an official evaluation of this branch, which means you need to sit down and answer my questions. Patricia sat down slowly and looked like she might be sick. Here's what's going to happen. Marcus closed the folder. This branch is being placed under formal review. I'm suspending all lending decisions pending a complete audit of your loan approval processes. I'm also placing you on immediate administrative leave while we investigate the discrimination complaints. You'll be contacted by Human Resources within 24 hours. You can't do this. Patricia's voice cracked. I've been with this bank for 23 years. I've won awards. My branch consistently meets its targets. Your branch meets its targets by systematically excluding qualified minority borrowers, which is both illegal and a violation of bank policy. The awards you've won are based on metrics that didn't account for discriminatory practices, and your 23 years of experience apparently taught you nothing about fair lending laws or basic human decency. Marcus stood up and gathered his materials. A team from corporate will arrive tomorrow to begin the formal investigation. You're not to discuss this conversation with anyone on staff. You're not to access any loan files or customer data. You're to go home and wait to hear from HR. If you violate any of these instructions, you'll be terminated immediately for cause, which means no severance and no references. Do you understand? Patricia nodded numbly, tears now streaming down her heavily made-up face. Marcus walked out of the office and into the main lobby. Every employee in the branch was staring at him now, clearly having heard at least parts of the conversation. Marcus approached Jennifer at the customer service desk. I'm Marcus Williams, Regional Director for Southeast Division. He showed her his ID. Mrs. Reynolds is going on administrative leave effective immediately. Who's the assistant manager here? A man in his 40s stepped forward nervously. That's me, sir. David Chen, Assistant Branch Manager. Mr. Chen, you're interim branch manager as of right now. I need you to call all staff together for a meeting in 15 minutes. Conference room if you have one. Yes, sir, we do. Good. And Mr. Chen, I'm going to need access to all loan files and customer complaint records for the past 3 years. Can you arrange that? Absolutely, sir. Marcus spent the next 4 hours at the Charlotte branch conducting interviews with staff, reviewing files and documenting everything he'd observed. The picture that emerged was deeply troubling. Patricia Reynolds had created a culture where discrimination was normalized and even encouraged. Several loan officers admitted they'd been instructed to apply higher scrutiny to minority applicants. One officer broke down in tears, describing how she'd been pressured to deny loans to qualified black business owners. The data was even more damning than Marcus had initially thought. When he expanded his analysis to 3 years instead of 2, he found that the disparity in approval rates had actually gotten worse over time. In the most recent 6 months, Patricia's branch had denied 89% of black loan applications compared to 38% of white applications. It was statistically impossible for this to be anything other than intentional discrimination. Marcus also discovered that Patricia had been coaching her staff on how to document loan denials in ways that would make them seem race-neutral. She'd instructed officers to cite vague concerns about business viability or market conditions rather than specific financial deficiencies. This made it harder for rejected applicants to challenge the decisions, but it also created a paper trail showing that the denials weren't based on legitimate underwriting standards. By the end of the day, Marcus had more than enough evidence to support immediate termination. He called headquarters that evening and briefed the CEO, Robert Martinez, on what he'd found. Martinez was furious but not surprised. He'd been hearing rumors about problems in the Charlotte branch for over a year, but previous investigations had been inconclusive because Patricia was skilled at covering her tracks. This time, the evidence was overwhelming. Martinez authorized Marcus to take whatever actions were necessary to address the situation. Within a week, Patricia Reynolds was formally terminated for cause. 2 other employees who'd participated in discriminatory practices were also fired. 3 more employees received written warnings and mandatory retraining. The Charlotte branch was completely restructured with new management and new policies. Marcus personally reached out to the 8 customers who'd filed discrimination complaints and offered to personally review their loan applications using proper underwriting standards. 6 of them had their loans approved within 2 weeks. The other 2 decided to take their business elsewhere, which Marcus understood and respected. But Marcus didn't stop there. He used the Charlotte investigation as a blueprint for examining all 47 branches in his territory. He implemented mandatory fair lending audits, conducted monthly data analysis, looking for statistical disparities in approval rates, and created an anonymous hotline where employees could report discriminatory practices without fear of retaliation. The changes weren't popular with everyone. Several longtime managers resigned rather than adapt to the new standards. A few branches saw short-term drops in loan volume as officers became more careful about their decision-making processes. But within 6 months, the results were undeniable. The approval rate gap between white and minority applicants had shrunk from 32 percentage points to less than 5. Customer satisfaction scores increased dramatically. And perhaps most importantly, the bank started attracting talented, diverse employees who'd previously avoided the industry due to its reputation for discrimination. The story eventually leaked to the local media, and First National Bank faced intense public scrutiny. The Charlotte Observer ran a front-page story about Patricia Reynolds' firing and the systemic discrimination Marcus had uncovered. Other news outlets picked up the story, and soon it was national news. Consumer advocacy groups praised the bank for taking action, but also questioned why the problems had been allowed to persist for so long. Instead of hiding from the controversy, Martinez and Marcus decided to lean into it. They held a joint press conference where they acknowledged the bank's failures, apologized to customers who'd been harmed, and outlined the comprehensive reforms being implemented. Marcus spoke passionately about the importance of fair lending and his personal commitment to ensuring that everyone had equal access to capital regardless of their race or background. The press conference went viral. Marcus became something of a celebrity in the banking world and was invited to speak at industry conferences and appear on financial news programs. He used every platform to push for stronger fair lending enforcement and to call out institutions that continued to discriminate. He became a vocal advocate not just for his own bank, but for systemic change across the entire industry. Patricia Reynolds tried to sue the bank for wrongful termination, claiming she'd been made a scapegoat for institutional problems that weren't her fault. Her lawyer argued that the bank had known about the disparities in approval rates for years and had only fired Patricia when the story became public. It was a desperate strategy, and it failed completely. When Marcus testified at the hearing, he brought 3 banker's boxes full of evidence documenting Patricia's discriminatory practices, including the recording of their meeting, her emails instructing staff to apply higher scrutiny to minority applicants, and testimony from multiple employees describing her racist comments. The case was dismissed, and Patricia was ordered to pay the bank's legal fees. She never worked in banking again. Word of what she'd done spread quickly through the industry, and no reputable institution would hire her. She eventually moved to a different state and took a job in retail management, but even there her reputation followed her. Within a year, she was struggling to find any employment at all. Marcus, meanwhile, continued to rise through the ranks at First National Bank. 2 years after the Charlotte investigation, he was promoted to Senior Vice President of Lending Operations, overseeing the entire Southeast and Mid-Atlantic regions. He used his expanded authority to implement even more aggressive fair lending reforms and to mentor other young executives, particularly people of color who wanted to make a difference in the industry. He never forgot that Wednesday morning in Charlotte, or the look on Patricia Reynolds' face when she realized that the young black man she'd dismissed and insulted was actually the person who controlled her career. That moment had confirmed what Marcus had always believed, that the best way to fight discrimination wasn't just to call it out, but to get into positions of power where you could actually change the systems that enabled it. Because sometimes the person you underestimate is the person who holds all the power. And sometimes prejudice doesn't just cost you a job or a reputation, it costs you everything you've spent decades building, and it exposes you as someone who never deserved the power you had in the first place. Patricia Reynolds learned that lesson too late, but Marcus made sure that thousands of other bankers learned it by watching what happened to her, and that Marcus believed was true justice. If this story moved, you share it, because financial discrimination keeps people from building wealth and achieving their dreams, and the only way to stop it is to hold institutions and individuals accountable every single time they choose prejudice over policy and profit over people. Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.